There is a sound you only hear after you remove things from your life. Not the noise of celebration or the echo of emptiness. Something kinder, a small, steady quiet that makes room for the rest of you. When I emptied my shelves and folded away the rest of my life, that quiet arrived like a guest I had been expecting. At first I thought minimalism would make my life lighter, but it made something else possible. Clarity. I used to ask, what can I throw away next? But one morning, sitting in the middle of a room that seemed too empty, I asked something different, and it changed everything. What is worth keeping? The first thing I kept was the teacup. It's not perfect. There is a hairline crack along the rim where it once slipped from my hand and landed on soft tatami. The glaze is crazed with age, like a faint map of a weathered life. When I pour tea into it each morning, the sound of liquid against ceramic tells me to slow down. The cup is warm in my hands in a way that feels like a practice. The Japanese word wabi-sabi taught me to love that asymmetry, to accept that value and beauty can live inside imperfection. I used to wait for flawless conditions to feel peaceful. Now the cup reminds me that small rituals matter more than perfect moments. It is a private altar to patience. The second thing I kept was the notebook. You would not call it a beautiful object. Its edges are frayed. Its pages are a messy patchwork of sketches, half-sentences, receipts, and lists. I keep it because of what happens when I open it. A conversation with myself. Minimalism cleared the surfaces. This notebook kept the conversation. There are lines that I no longer remember writing, and that is the point. They show a path, the shape of thoughts over time. Some pages are rubbish. Some are still warm with ideas I might one day use. The notebook is a promise. I will remember to attend to my mind in the quiet. The third thing I kept was a photograph. A single black and white print sits in a thin frame. It is not a staged portrait. They look unguarded, my family laughing at something small. I used to build albums by the 100, each photo a desperate attempt to hold a moment. Yet for years that stack of images cluttered a closet and my memory. The one photo I kept doesn't attempt to capture everything. It simply reminds me of belonging, of a lineage that taught me how to sit with silence. When I look at it, I feel that trust again. That feeling cannot be digitized. The fourth thing I kept was the lamp. It is modest and soft. Not bright enough to read a phone or fill a large room, but just enough light to reveal the edges of things. At night I switch it on, and the room becomes a small island of warmth. The lamp taught me that light can be gentle and still honest. We don't need harsh brightness to see what matters. Minimalism removed the excess glare and left a small, dependable glow. A signal that there is space for rest, contemplation, and the slow movement of thought. When everything shouts for attention, this lamp whispers. The fifth thing I kept was the kimono. I found it in a second-hand shop. The deep indigo faded to the color of a late afternoon sky. When I slip it on, the shoulders know my posture. The fabric settles like an old friend. It is not a costume. It is a reminder that identity does not come from variety or volume. It comes from choices held steady. Wearing it is an act that anchors my morning. I move slower, speak gentler, work with less hurry. Minimalism taught me to keep fewer clothes, but the kimono taught me to keep the style that roots me. The sixth thing I kept was the stone. A small, smooth river stone sits on my shelf. It did nothing when I found it. It does nothing now except exist. Yet when I close my hand around it, I remember a day by the water, the cold on my ankles, the sound of distant bells. The stone is a slow thing, a test of patience. It is a proof that stability is often quiet. Minimalism cuts the clutter, and what remains becomes a place to touch the things that hold history. This stone holds a moment, and therefore it holds me. The sixth thing I kept was the stone. A small, smooth river stone sits on my shelf. It did nothing when I found it. It does nothing now except exist. Yet when I close my hand around it, I remember a day by the water, the cold on my ankles, the sound of distant bells. The stone is a slow thing, a test of patience. It is a proof that stability is often quiet. Minimalism cuts the clutter, and what remains becomes a place to touch the things that hold history. This stone holds a moment, and therefore it holds me. The seventh thing I kept was the pen. Not expensive, not famous, a reliable black pen that will always write. I keep it because of what it asks me to do. Begin. Creativity, like discipline, thrives with limits. When I let go of dozens of tools and notebooks, that single pen sat stubbornly in my pocket, reminding me that constraint brings focus. I learned to say fewer words, but to make the ones I kept count. The pen is the small instrument that translates silence into thought. The last thing I kept is not an object. It is the gap between them, the empty shelf, the clean corner of the room, the unfilled page on the desk. For a long time I feared emptiness. I equated it with failure or loss. But emptiness is not absence, it is potential. It is the place where life begins again. When nothing is pressing into every corner, something else grows, room for thought, for sleep, for small acts of care. The space I kept is where I meet possibility. These 8 things are neither evidence of ascetic courage nor of deprivation. They are quiet signposts, small commitments that point me back to a sensible life. Minimalism did not teach me to renounce. It taught me to choose what stays and why. There is a rhythm to the practice, the ritual of waking, the tea, the notebook, the lamp, the work that flows without franticness, the rest that arrives without guilt. You start to notice small economies of attention. You reassign value from the loud to the enduring. When evening comes, I put the teacup down, open the notebook, and turn on the lamp. The room is small, but there is a fullness in it. Not a fullness of things, but a fullness of presence. The light fades, the room returns to quiet. What remains is not less, it is enough.